Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge. In today's episode, manager bullies me for several months until I finally quit. I made sure to get him fired. You slept with my GF. Better watch your back. Neighbor didn't like how I did my own lawn. Before we get into today's episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss a video. So let's get started. Manager bullies me for several months until I finally quit. I made sure to get him fired. Obligatory, English is not my native language, apologies for my mistakes and grammar. This happened around 2016. I'd, at the time 25-26 sem, been without a job for a while, looking for a better paying job than I had before, and I found one at a camera security company that was looking to hire someone for the service desk. I went for an interview and got a call back later that day. If I wanted the job, it was mine. Now, my new manager was an ex-military. Specifically ex-army, not American, just pointing that out. He really didn't like having people disagree with or going against him. A thing I was very unaware of when I took the job. For 2/3 of a month everything was going well. The manager was cordial and seemed to really enjoy having me there. I worked my butt off every day, as the software we were working with was unknown to me, so I studied a lot and even went overseas to another country to follow a course and succeeded on my exams. However, after that period, my grandpa, who was like a second father to me, suddenly was hospitalized after a brain bleed. Aneurysm. He was found in the shower. He had collapsed after he pressed his panic button. Assisted living? Not sure how it's called in English, apologies. This all happened on a Wednesday. The family came together in the hospital several times to show support and see Grandpa. However, on Friday afternoon, 3 p.m. I was called up by my father, my grandpa's son, while I was at work, and he explained to me that Grandpa unfortunately passed away. I was in tears on the phone and in utter shock. It took me a while to calm down. I went to my manager and explained what just happened and that I'm going home to be with my family. However, that day there was an event. The company was doing a charity event, and this charity was going to be public news. They already announced the amount of people participating, and it would look bad if they were a person down. It was basically just for good PR. So he refused to let me go. I told him that by law he cannot deny me, as my contract states I can take a day for a death in the family, and that I was leaving now. This was the turning point. He went from a nice manager to a manager from hell. Suddenly everything I did was wrong. I was told he couldn't believe I was in this line of work for 6 years and be this bad at my job. He cussed me out and ridiculed me in front of my colleagues and even clients. This all continued for several months and severely began to impact my mental health. I had a talk with my parents and my fiancée, at the time still my girlfriend. I'd ask her to marry me in December 2016, and they basically told me that this was not okay, that I didn't have to take this, and that I should give them my 2 weeks notice. I agreed. The following day I went to HR and explained why I was leaving the company and that I couldn't stand the idea of working even a single day more with that excuse of a human being. HR showed interest in my well-being and, even more importantly, in what I was claiming about my manager. They had received more complaints about him, but nobody had proof of his wrongdoings. So, they asked me if I had proof. I told them I'd be looking for a new job, but I'd gladly fit in the time to collect all I could. For the next 2 weeks I collected everything. Memos, emails, voice recordings. When on the phone the calls are automatically recorded, and the dumbass was stupid enough to cuss me out while I was on the phone. Lucky me. Also lucky was that my colleagues at the desk had my back this entire time. They'd been trying to cheer me up, said I was doing fine work, and that they also didn't understand this man's behavior. So, when I came by and asked if they'd mind signing a document that everything I stated in the paperwork was the truth, they gladly did. I had one last talk with HR and him at the same time the last day I was there. Before he even walked in, I told the HR person who was mediating, he's going to walk in, say what he wants to say, and I'll be quiet and listen. When he's done, I'll explain my side and he's going to interrupt me, tell you I'm lying, and talk about completely non-related subject matter to drag the conversation another direction. She looked surprised at my comment, but had no time to respond, as Mr. Army Man walked in and began his spiel. Exactly as I stated, he'd blurt his side out, and once I tried to talk he'd consistently interrupt me and tried to pick fights. Eventually I got up, told HR, "I told you so. Here's the documents you've been asking for." I placed a filled folder with several dozens of emails, plenty of memos and a USB containing 3 phone conversations and even video footage of him yelling at me. In both voice and video recordings you could easily hear him cuss me out. I gave the manager a big bright smile, who was smirking viciously, and said to him, "I don't think you'll be smirking like that for long. Enjoy your little victory." His smirk disappeared into a confused scowl, but I slammed the door on him before he could respond and left the building feeling like a huge, and I mean humongous-sized, planet-sized amount of stress fell off my shoulders. Within a month, I was back to my old self. 2 months later I was working at a new job, and out of curiosity I checked my ex-manager's LinkedIn. Unemployed. I called one of my old colleagues to ask what exactly went down. My proof opened Pandora's box. He was being disrespectful to the female staff, insulted the older staff, and on multiple occasions was less than cordial with our external hires. None of these complaints were acted upon, because it was his word against theirs and there was no proof. However, me providing overwhelming proof of his gross behavior towards me made all other complaints now to be taken as fact. He was promptly fired less than a month after I left, and they refused to provide him with any form of reference. In a field like his, references mean a lot. So not getting one from a company you worked at for nearly a year is a huge red flag. It's now 2020, 4 years passed, and according to LinkedIn he's still not working in his field. I'll gladly admit that I felt rather wickedly satisfied and still do whenever I happen to think about it. You slept with my GF. Better watch your back. Full disclosure, this isn't my story. It happened to a friend of mine who lives in USA a long time ago, so dialogue isn't exact. He gave me permission to post it on Reddit. For ease of writing I'll write it as if it happened to me. Due to the nature of the story, some details have been changed. Cast me friend. Karen me's GF had a drug addiction but was clean for 2 years, important for later. Jill business owner. Jake old friend, ## whole of the story. I live with my GF Karen and my old grade school friend Jake, who was working as a sales rep. We live on the outskirts of a well-known city in the States. I was in my late 20s. I found myself looking for work as a bar I was working at closed down. Knowing I was desperate for work, Jake calls me and tells me his new GF Jill just purchased a motel per bar with a small kitchen and she is after hired help. Needless to say I jump at the opportunity as Karen wasn't working, the bills were piling up and health insurance was due. I called Jill, arranged to meet her at her new property to introduce myself. Jake made the introductions in person and had already told Jill I was hands-on DIY person with hospitality experience. Now to explain, my dad is a Sparky and believes if you can pay someone to fix something, you could probably do it cheaper yourself. He taught me lots and still does to this day. After a 30-minute chat, Jill tested me with a few odd jobs like rewiring an outlet, fixing a clogged sink, and quizzed me on liquor laws. Needless to say I was hired that day. Originally work was all about getting the property ready for business. Jill thought it would have been minor works, paint, replacement of fixings and furniture. We soon found out the electrical wires were shot. The whole place needed rewiring, which was a cause of stress for Jill as it would have blown her budget. Lucky for Jill, my dad was between contracts and offered his services using leftover stock, already paid for from other jobs. Jill would need to cover the cost of any new product required. As for labor, his payment, he said he enjoys a steak and beer on Friday nights. After 3 weeks of helping Dad, the wiring was done, was up to code and at a fraction of the cost. Jill and I spent 1 to 2 months painting all 15 motel rooms, bistro, bar, cleaning the kitchen, cool rooms, etc. Jake would offer to help but always left after 20 minutes saying he has to make a sale. Jill often worked well into the night. After all, this was her dream. I'd take some furniture home to restore after hours and return it once restored. Business opened up after 6 months, and thanks to Dad, opened under budget. Jill managed the business and ran the kitchen. I worked where I was needed. In the kitchen, on the bar, tending to maintenance. I was on salary, second in charge, and could work in any position. Things went smoothly for a year. Business was turning a profit. Dad was getting his weekly beer and steak. Karen seemed happy. Jake was still working as a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company. One day I felt crook at work, so I clocked off and went home early. Pulling into my driveway, with the exception of a turning gut, things felt normal. Jake's car was there, but he lived there, so I didn't think anything was wrong. As usual, I parked behind Jake, important for later. When I opened the door, I found Karen doing the reverse cowgirl with Jake on the couch. After seeing me, Jake grabbed his pants and ran out through the back door. Karen and I argued into the night. She tried blaming me, saying I'm never home. I'm spending too much time with Jill, we were keeping things professional, I was her employee. I went to bed and told her she can sleep in Jake's bed as she clearly finds it more comfortable. I called Jill and informed her of this as Jake was her boyfriend. She was upset as he cheated on her but admitted she suspected he was seeing someone else. Jill offered me a room at the motel until I figure out my next move. The next day I loaded my personal effects in the truck. Jake's car was still there as I had blocked it in. I told Karen she can keep the rental and the furniture. I said Karen I'd be back for my tools in a few hours and I would appreciate if she wasn't there. I went home that afternoon to load my tools into my truck. While I was grabbing something from under my workbench, I found a bag I wasn't familiar with. Upon closer inspection, I found in a large quantity little tablets. The way they were packed and hidden made me realize they were probably ecstasy. A thorough search of the house led to me finding 2 more bags and about $12,000 in cash. I put 2 and 2 together and realized that Jake's pharmaceutical sales job was code for drug dealer, and Jake probably traded pills to Karen for sex. I was beyond angry until I realized that I have all I need to get him back. The revenge. Jake's car still hadn't moved. I went inside and grabbed his spare keys, chucked on a pair of gloves that were in the garage. I put half the money and 1 bag of drugs in his boot and thought, hang on, this won't pass. I removed his spare tire from the wheel well and put the bag in there. The other 2 bags, I threw them down the storm drain in the laneway behind my house. As for the $6,000 cash, Jake did cost me a house full of furniture. Just saying. I sent a message to both Jake and Karen with the typical hurt script. I can't believe you did this, we were friends blah blah blah. I've left, I hope you two are happy together. I then made an anonymous tip to the local police and ATF about a man fitting Jake's description, loading what looks like drugs into the boot of a car that sounded Jake's car and provided a partial plate number that matched Jake's car. It didn't take long for law enforcement to find the car and locate the drugs. What I wasn't counting on is Karen was driving the car at the time. She was later released when they found out she was driving the wrong car at the wrong time. A warrant went out for Jake's arrest. The icing on the cake. I found out later that not only was the police after Jake, his supplier was as well, as he lost a lot of product. Fast forward 3 months, I purchased a house. I was still working with Jill. Karen was pregnant with Jake's baby and he was on the run. I suspected she was keeping contact with Jake because she suddenly left the district when she was 8 months pregnant. 12 months after the incident, after a drunken night, Jill and I mixed business with pleasure and started dating. That was 10 years ago. We are married, have 2 children and just opened our 3rd business. Dad still gets his weekly steak and beer. I did hear a rumor that Jake and Karen wound up in Alaska but can't confirm this. I do feel a little bad about it now because Jake made it possible for me to date Jill and live a wonderful life. I do hope he is well. Neighbor didn't like how I did my own lawn. I moved into my house around the same time as my next door neighbor's new construction neighborhood. We both do our own lawns. They bag their cuttings. I self-mulch, leave the cuttings mulched on the lawn and don't bag. One day I mow the lawn and leave for some errands. I come home to the cuttings I had left on the lawn all raked up and thrown all over my front porch door with a threatening note telling me if this ever happened again and I didn't do my lawn properly from now on, there would be consequences and it would be worse next time. I went over to my neighbor's house, told her I would call the police for threatening me if she ever tried a stunt like this again, and that next time she had a problem, maybe try talking with me like an adult, and gave her my phone number. Her husband apologized and said his wife was batshit crazy and he was really sorry. Wife never apologized. I then promptly didn't mow the front lawn for over 6 months, no wah. I made sure to mow the backyard and make a display of bagging those cuttings and carrying them out front for the neighbor to see, but left the front nice and overgrown. I also ended up having her car towed from in front of her own house. Coincidentally, code enforcement can't force you to mow your lawn, but if you leave a vehicle on the street for over 72 hours without moving it, they'll impound. $600 later she got her car back and I haven't heard a peep from her. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and we'll see you in the next video.